We're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, old styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's November 30th here in Seoul. I'm Shin, and you're watching News Generation. Joining me in the studio is Nail Song.
Good morning.
Good morning, and Park Ki-hoon.
I'm Park Kyung from Generation X.
Gen X.
Gen X.
All right. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. Samsung on Wednesday promoted a total of 143 executives as part of its year-end reshuffle. Though it was the lowest number of promotions since May of 2017, the tech giant included a large swath of young executives in their 30s and 40s. This includes Kwon Young-dae, Samsung SDS's first-ever vice president in his 30s. Samsung explained that they promoted more young executives to prepare for a generational shift. And from today, world leaders will convene in Dubai to attend COP28, the annual UN Climate Summit. Every year, governments around the world discuss what they'll do to reach the 2015 Paris Agreement goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. But two key players won't be attending. That's U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping. Instead, Washington and Beijing are expected to send their high-level representatives. This has spurred much debate as a key agenda in the UN Climate Change Summit is how major economies like the U.S. and China should contribute toward compensating low-income countries suffering disproportionately from climate change despite contributing relatively less to its causes. Ending off with news in Korea. Recently, the National Tax Service said they're closely monitoring the property and assets of people with high-earning salaries, such as YouTubers and influencers. To be exact, officials are monitoring 25 of them under the suspicion of trying to evade taxes. Now, officials recently discovered a popular way YouTubers or streamers try evading taxes is by first creating a corporate account under the name of their significant other or the person they're living with, then wiring money in little by little. Other common methods include exchanging one's assets into virtual currencies or cash. Now, here in the studio, what did you guys think about these high-income people such as YouTubers and streamers frequently flaunting their wealth on social media, yet allegedly trying to evade taxes? And what type of measures would you like to see be implemented to prevent this thing from ever happening again?
25 seems to be a small number compared to so many people trying to earn money through social media, but they must be making ridiculous amount of money to be monitored by the National Tax Service. But no matter how much money you earn, evading tax is obviously against the law and you should be penalized if you do cross that line. But in the social media platform, it's only been a couple of years where people started making a lot of money through streaming or whatever, like making their own account. But I think because thanks to these people, I think stricter guidelines and laws will be implemented, and it will be only a matter of time where these things will not happen anymore, or less frequently. And lastly, unless you're a lawmaker, doing something suspicious and thinking you can get away with it is a very foolish way of making any kind of money, and in the future, it's really not going to get you anywhere.
Exactly. And I think a lot of netizens who came across this news were a bit enraged to see them so willingly flaunt their wealth on social media because they're YouTubers, right? That's what they do for their living. A lot of them, they just show how many luxury brand items or luxury brand goods they have. But at the same time, they're evading their taxes. That seems quite hypocritical. What were your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I know how hard it is to get monetized on YouTube. So I know that they put in a lot of work. And I also know that it's kind of tricky to know how to do your taxes with these kinds of things as platforms such as YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. It's all fairly new ways to make money. However, it does seem like they absolutely knew what they were doing, and that I'm not okay with. There needs to be a stricter regulations for online monetization, as well as an easier way to pay taxes and a guideline that's very clear.
And I think in order for us to do that, we need to have better understanding of what exactly our tax duties are, and maybe better education could help. Now let's move on to our main discussion topic of the day. You guys might be wondering why we've been talking about Gen X and we're dressing like this. Well, the latest trend here in Korea is following Gen X trends, or what it was like in the 90s, starting from fashion all the way to the way people from this generation talk. Take a look at the screen to find out what it looks like to be trying to be a Gen X.
안녕하세요. 제가 요즘 그 X세대거든요. 엄마가요, 무슨 앞머리를 이렇게 물미역처럼 내려놨냐고 하시는데, 가장 중요한 건 개성이거든요. 제 마음에 들면 됐죠. 남들 시선 따윈 중요하지 않아요.
That was our very own Nell. And for those of you who don't speak Korean, you may not know off the bat what makes this video so funny or how that's capturing Gen X's distinct way of speaking. So we'll elaborate for you. Here in the studio, Nell, you were the one acting out in the video. So why can't you explain to us what the main traits of Gen X are that kids these days or people from our generation are trying to follow?
Well, first of all, honored, really.
That was great acting.
It was
by the way. It was
great.
great acting, yeah.
I thought literally
so
we went on a
embarrassed.
time machine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I thought it was looking at your mom.
I know, same here.
Thank you. So I want to talk about the distinctive trait that they have when they're talking. It's a very almost fabricated way of speech, and it has this tone of voice, and that's kind of caught on to this trend. There's actually been a lot of media coverage and viral videos going around about, I guess, the Gen X tone of voice.
Right, and the video that you were acting out in, we saw a different eyebrow style, your hairstyle was a bit different, especially your lip color was different too, right?
Yes, I'm kind of going for that like SES 바다 look today.
I see.
It's the little bit of the almost like antlers, a little bit of antennas here and there,
Little
and
bangs in the side.
almost looks gothic, but I'm kind of going for like a brick colored makeup here.
Yeah, and just about it, you mentioned SES, and SES is an iconic girl group that represented K-pop back in the 90s, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it seems that that generation to us, the younger generation, seems kind of carefree and unrefined, and their attitude is, you know, very oh, who cares kind of thing.
Right.
And so I feel like a lot of the younger generation nowadays are kind of following that fashion, the really baggy jeans that drag to the floor, the crop tops that show your belly, and then you have the bandanas like all the panelists and the our anchors wearing, this little bang that I'm doing right now. And so a lot of this this trend is getting incorporated into new K-pop trends, like in new jeans, in their fashion, almost a little bit into their music. And I think that is, yeah, that's basically what's happening with this new generation's old Gen X trend.
Right. So to sum it up, I think the main traits of Gen X these days is number one, fashion. We can see a difference in fashion. As you can see, all of us are going for that old look back in the 90s. Now, would you like to elaborate on some other traits there, Ki-hoon?
Sure thing. Swinging it back to the 90s, you know, Gen X, otherwise known as the forgotten generation, are people born in the 70s, and they are squashed between the baby boomers and the millennials, and they're quite outnumbered. That's why they're called the forgotten generation. And it was named after a book written by Douglas Coupland. For your information, they were the first to experience the internet, the parachute pants, and a generation that really worried that Y2K would ruin the world.
Maybe it did.
It could have, yeah. People from this generation have this great sense of independence because they grew up with both working parents and they spent most of their childhood actually raising themselves.
Right.
So they're very independent people. And also, this generation also experienced the greatest decade of music from the 70s all the way to the 90s. And that's why they have come to appreciate all different styles of music from jazz, hip hop, R&B, blues, so on. And not just with the music, and Naya talked about the fashion as well. This is when the denim kicked in, the love for denim. As you can see, I'm all dressed top, bottom denim with the bandanas as well. And so is Naya. And look, it started that trend, and it still is in trend. As you can see, I still really love wearing the jeans, the denims.
Yeah.
And I think these traits are very classic back in the day, authentic and somewhat genuine, that a lot of millennials like ourselves and Gen Zs like Yeon really want to pick up on these days.
Yeah. And if you guys are looking at the screen right now, you can see each and every one of us trying to follow like a Gen X style. Like, I would like to go and explain my look first. So I am having these side bangs out. Nowadays, I think K-beauty resonates around natural beauty. But I don't know if you guys can notice, but I have really strong contour. And back in the 90s, that was the style. Like you really wanted to accentuate your facial features by putting a lot of contour on. You would put bandanas on. And I think it has to do with the free spirit. Now, would you like to explain your look for a while?
Well, I mean, like Hyun was mentioning, it's the love of denim. I have this denim jacket, denim jeans, just denim all everywhere. And this really high ponytail and this kind of scrunchies were very 90s, and
brick lip color.
And obviously this very wet look kind of bang, which is just by strand. So that's the look I went for.
Yeah, and Hyun, as you briefly mentioned, I think you really represent like the epitome of a free-spirited 90s guy.
Do I?
Yeah, a lot of idols would look like this back in the day.
I mean, like, I would, if I was in the 90s right now, I would wear, I guess, like a lot more baggier kind of jacket, overfit, and same with the pants. But to talk about the bandanas, you know, you can wear it like this. I don't know if many of your viewers know, but there was a group called 서태지와 아이들.
Yeah.
And they really put this on the trend, on the market. Like the way they wore the bandanas, it was like all these different styles, like covering the part of their hair. Like really down to their eyes as well. And like they wore it on their necks as well. So even on their wrists. So it was just kind of like that fashion item, the it item that you had to have to be the cool guy. So I don't feel very cool at the moment. I feel very embarrassed. But back in the day, like this is how you had to dress to be the cool guy, to pick up all the ladies.
Exactly.
Yeah, and be the fashionista. So yeah, that's how it was back in the day.
Exactly, back in the day. And I don't know about you guys. You say you were embarrassed. I was a little embarrassed too at first. But I think I'm having fun to it because basically we're seeing retro back in style. Things from the past, namely trends from the 90s, are hitting it back. And it's fun to try it out. And we asked if our viewers, if they could relate to this and if they've seen such a trend in their respective countries. Take a look at the screen to find out what 3 of them had to say. Toby said, retro music has been a trend not only in the music industry, but also in more than a few blockbuster movies and series. Guardians of the Galaxy and Stranger Things both come to mind. Jack said, I also love that retro video games and gaming systems have become popular again, and that many games have since been remade and remastered for new systems. Hannah said, Japan is experiencing a revival of vinyl records as audiophiles praise their warm, rich sound and analog authenticity. Now we're going to talk to another Gen X ourselves to see what he has to say on this growing trend that not only seems to be popular here in Korea, but in also other parts of the world. He's also an expert that analyzes pop culture and the latest trends as a living, so he's a perfect match for our today's episode. We'll include him in our talks right after this. To find out what a Gen X has to say on trends from his youth coming back in style these days, we're going to talk to Bernie Cho. Bernie is the president of DFSB Collective, a South Korean agency specializing in distributing K-pop songs worldwide. In other words, Bernie has to stay up to date with the latest cultural trends. Welcome back, Bernie.
Thank you. I don't know if you guys deliberately scheduled to do this broadcast on a Thursday, because this is like a throwback Thursday, and your looks are triggering me right now. So.
Well, let's go back. Let's throw back ourselves into why we think our generation is into Gen X trends from the 90s.
Well, you know, it's interesting because I think, like you mentioned, and you know, some of your viewers mentioned as well, is we started seeing sort of a kind of what's old is new kind of momentum over the past few years, whether like, for instance, in the US, Stranger Things, that hit Netflix show, all of a sudden just made anything and everything from the 80s to the 90s cool again. And then we started seeing it spill over to music, you know, whether it was The Weeknd or Dua Lipa or even Miley Cyrus. You know, they were bringing back sounds and vibes, and it was, you know, they were becoming hits. And then, you know, we started seeing the same thing happening in Korea as well. It was, you know, whether it was TV shows like Reply 1994, 1997, was it 25, 21? And then there's a really interesting one. The title threw me off because I was like, how did they get this past their investors? But Twinkling Watermelon is, one of the throwback, dramas from the 90s right now. And again, we see it in TV, we see it in film, and obviously music. And, music's had a really big impact. I noticed a lot of big 90s bands were doing, their 25th or their 30th anniversary, releases or concerts or tours. And then we started seeing some singers, new singers, doing covers of classic 90s songs, and those became hits. And then we saw some 90s singers working with younger artists to redo some of their 90s hits. And so we saw that momentum coming. But like you mentioned, it was New Jeans that sort of opened the floodgates. Yeah. New Jeans had just monster hits with their songs like, OMG. And they had a sound that, it seems so fresh, but yet it was recognizable because it was, referencing a lot from the 90s. And we're starting to see that sound spill over to other acts. For instance, 50/50 Cupid is also synth pop. And so, right now, being into the 90s is sort of the moment. And all of a sudden, Gen X became popular again. I thought I was about to be, benched for, going on to be a retiree, but all of a sudden, it's hip.
They're the coolest generation now.
I mean, you just mentioned a lot of the, 90s trends in the West as well. Like, I don't know, like retro. Britney Spears, I can't believe she's considered retro now. Yeah. But what are some unique characteristics for the trends from the 90s in Korea, would you say?
Well, I think what's interesting about when I watch a lot of these TV dramas, and I was here in the 90s in Korea, and things developed so fast. That really, I think, right after the '88 Olympics here in Seoul, the Korean, not just economy, but more importantly, the pop culture just really accelerated in growth. And I think that sort of hyper growth was very exciting and dizzying, and people had no choice but to be a bit carefree and independent because so much was happening and so much was going on that, artists and they just had no issues taking risks, fashion risks to music risks to whatnot. And so I think, people, in this day and age want to sort of reminisce about sort of, that kind of beautifully chaotic hypergrowth era. And look, we wouldn't be here today in the music industry if it wasn't for 90s icon singers becoming entrepreneurs. And, the industry, whether it's TV, film, and especially music, was really built on the blood, sweat, and tears of these 90s icons.
Right.
Right.
Bernie, it's not just Korea that's seeing trends from the 90s back in style. Why is retro back, and how can we read into this? And also, are there any socioeconomic factors that can explain this sudden kind of comeback?
Oh, wow, that's a tough question coming from a guy with a headband like that. It threw me off.
I didn't come up with that question, by the way.
I think it's multiple factors. I think the fact is that, it seems like every decade, as much as they're supposed to be innovating, for some reason, as they look forward, they're constantly looking back. I remember 10 years ago, like, the 60s were hot, and then soon after, the 70s were hot. Now the 80s and 90s are having their moment. In terms of, the socioeconomic impact, I probably would rather defer to an academic on that one. But at least what I see and what I hear, what I feel and what I experience, last night I was at an album launch party, and it was fascinating because all the visuals and the sounds and everything were throwback, vibes. And I think what it does is for those who are younger, it's something very new and different and fresh. And those who are older, full disclosure, guys like me, it's flashbacks of earlier times that were more fun. And so it appeals, I think, on two very different levels. For those who are younger, it's new, and for those who are older, it's a rewind. It's a nice sort of flashback.
Bernie, I think you mentioned it perfectly. I think it's the reason why we're seeing retro and Gen X back in style is because it's fresh but recognizable. Thank you so much, Bernie. It was a pleasure talking to you today.
Thank you.
Oh, likewise, and hopefully we won't see acid washed on air again.
All right, fingers crossed. Now we're going to continue adding our own analysis to the growing Gen X trend. What are some things people from our generation specifically like most from Gen X now?
You know, I think Bernie actually did a great job telling us, but a huge part of it is music, and it's such a natural and seamless way to bond with any generation. But many of the older K-pops are now considered a classic, and it's considered fun too. And I want to talk about the K-drama series that Bernie briefly mentioned, the Reply 1997, 1994, 1998. It showed the current generation the kind of the romantic side, like the LP and the vinyl, like going back to the analog days, excuse me, and definitely just kind of going back to the older ways and seeing what it could be like as we bonded with the characters in the drama, the fashion, the music. See, like HOT's Candy came back and it's being remade. It's been remade by NCT, and this was actually a really beloved song by HOT from Reply 1997. I think that was her favorite group, and now the younger generation loves it. So OMG, New Jeans, definitely the new sound, but also kind of familiar with the Gen X. And I heard a lot of the older generation love and enjoy New Jeans music as well.
Especially their fashion, the songs, the beats, as Bernie mentioned. Now, Ki-hoon, why don't you focus on the fashion trends that came back that really resonate with our generation?
Yeah, because fashion goes around in circles. Back in Generation X, Y2K fashion was trending, the old money look, and of course the school uniform look. And as you can see on the screen, you know, there are many youngsters who want to wear different styles of clothes that are trending now. But as you can see, that person with the braided hair, look at those long,
long jeans,
long coat. Even the hairstyle as well, and there's so many little small vintage shops, and that's around like many Hongdae area, and a lot of youngsters are visiting those places to get their hands on those old school clothes because they don't really sell them in shops anymore. So as you can see, that person, she's really
she's really
jeans,
into it,
and there's platform shoes as well. And like this generation X, they had a lot of freedom and a variety of styles coexisted. So they had a lot of liberty in expressing themselves, which showed in their fashion. So as you saw from the video, like crop tops, mini skirts, wide pants, platform shoes, all sorts of things. They're still trending now, and I think their fashion, they'll just come and go, but it just goes around in circles.
Yeah, but let's end off with analyzing why. Why do you guys think that Gen X is really resonating with our generation, namely Millennials and Gen Z? Very briefly.
Right. I think it's because it definitely has a color of its own. Bernie mentioned that there's a sense of freedom and this endless possibility that Gen X had going into the millennium. And I think the current generation really longs for that. And just kind of remembering that, romanticizing that is the reason why it appeals to us.
Ki-hoon?
I just want to say many of our parents are from this generation, Generation X, and I think it's a great way to really connect with them and just talk about how they lived, how they were like us in our age, and how they spent their childhood, their teens. And I think it's a really great way to really learn about how they grew up.
Yeah,
and
for
really,
sure.
for them, it's recognizable. For us, it's very fresh, and retro is the new neutro. So
retro is the neutral. And I think you guys both mentioned a really good point. It's not just the fact that fashion styles are back and we get to learn about a new generation. I think the biggest thing about Gen X styles coming back is it becomes a bridge for us to better understand our parents and for our parents to understand how we're having fun with what used to trend back in their days. Now, in the meantime, we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Nell-sang.
No problem.
And Park Ki-hoon.
always a pleasure.
All right. And thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are News Generation.